Well, good early evening, late afternoon. How's everybody doing today? Great. Try to stand away from the speaker a little bit better. Everybody have a good day today? Yes, great. You can have a good day tomorrow too, and the day after, and the day after. So I don't know how many of you were in the panoramic lounge last night. A few of you maybe? No? Okay. Well, I'll do my own introduction since they didn't put anything in the flyers, so if I just stand up here, you'll wonder who I am. Those of you that were in the panoramic lounge last night, they introduced all the entertainers, so I know it'll be redundant for you, but there's really not much I can do about that. So with that, we'll get started. So my name's Peter LaSorsa. I'm originally from Boston, live in the Chicago area now. I'll start at high school. After high school, so I was in Special Forces in the Army. Out of high school, I was in 10th Group. I told this story last night, but I like the story. Colonel Aaron Banks founded Special Forces in 1952. And the reason he called the first one 10th Group is that the Soviet Union spent a lot of time and money looking for the other 9 groups that didn't exist. Saying, he was a big thinker. We need more thinkers like that today. And so I try to use that strategy. There's a smarter way sometimes of doing things that doesn't cost you any extra money if you just think of things differently. After that, I spent some time doing some intelligence work, some security work, of course, technology. You can't do any of it without that. Made my way to law school. Currently an attorney. I have my own practice, but I don't really do a whole lot of work. I normally travel, but the pandemic's been absolutely killing me. You know, I usually do 8 months a year traveling, about maybe 2 or 3 months on cruise ships and 5 or 6 months on my own. So I was going a little cuckoo at the house. So I'm sure many of you were too. So I hope I'm not too rusty. I generally, I haven't lectured in about 2 years because I don't just walk around my house lecturing on the Romans and the Greeks. Neighbors would think I'm a little crazy. On my free time, I like to hike. Any hikers out there if you want to talk hiking? Yeah, so I've been to Everest Base Camp. I've been to Kilimanjaro. I love Peru. I've probably done 10 or 12 different hikes to Machu Picchu, Chacaquia. Chacaquia is actually twice the size of Machu Picchu, and nobody goes there. And it's not like the Yogi Berra, nobody goes there because it's too crowded. Nobody goes there because nobody goes there. So it's great. You might have the whole ruins to yourself, Huayna Picchu. So the other reason I put a few different pictures up there is they're going to broadcast these on television. So if you ever missed one, want to watch one, they're on your television, but they just show the slides. So for people that aren't in here that see the slides that have a question for me, they wouldn't know who I am around the ship. And this way, if they see some pictures of me in just regular clothes, they may recognize me on the ship. Make sense? Yep. All right. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do, Crete has 2 stops, the stop tomorrow and then Suda Bay. So as something relates to tomorrow's stop, I'll say this is tomorrow's stop. As something relates to the stop in Suda Bay, I'll say this will be the Suda Bay stop, so you can kind of keep those separate. You're going to see something in the museum probably from 130,000 years, so that's how long people have been on the island of Crete. Probably came over in a raft from Africa, but that's the extent of how far back we're going to go. We're then going to fast forward to about 3000 BC, because in between there's a whole lot of nothing. A bunch of people that didn't do a whole lot of, sticks and twigs and stuff, so we're not going to concentrate on the sticks and twigs. The Minoan culture was probably the first great civilization in Europe. The bull, as you'll see, I'll be telling some stories, is going to be about 3 or 4 different bulls. That's their famous symbol, so whenever you see the bull, that's Minoan. And I'll give you the foundational story of how they come to be known as the Minoans. Right? Somebody will always ask me, how is Crete named? I don't want to really get too far into that, because who cares at the end of the day, right? There's a Greek corruption of the word, 2 or 3 stories there. Zeus supposedly was either born on the island or he was taken there as a very, very small child, put in a cave by his mother Rhea to protect him from his father, who liked to eat babies. So he's up in the cave in Mount Ida, And the priestesses that had to guard him were called the Curtes. Anybody been to Ephesus? Yep. The main street in Ephesus that goes all the way from up the top of the hill down to the Library of Celsus, that's the Curtes. Those are the priestesses there, same cult, that would go all the way to the Temple of Artemis, Diana, one of the 7 wonders of the natural world. So, same cult. So it's a corruption of that world, Curtes, that word that could be Crete. Also, Zeus, the god of gods, is married to Hera. She has a orchard. One of them is the apples of Hesperides, and that's the 11th labor of Hercules. Well, in that it's guarded by the giant Atlas, and in that Atlas has 9 children. One of the kids is named Crete, and so it's named after that. So there's all kinds of different foundational stories of how Crete becomes Crete. But the Minoan story is much more interesting, and that's what I'm going to spend my time on. But that's just a couple for you to think about. Whichever one you want to pick for Crete is fine. So we have to start with Zeus, god of God. He's married to Hera, as I say, but he has a wandering eye. And there's a princess, a Phoenician princess in the city of Tyre, modern-day Lebanon. Her name's Europa. So he spots her and he said, boy, I'd really like to get with her. So he changes himself into this beautiful white bull. And he puts on this special lotion so she'll be attracted to him. She can't get her hands off her. It's kind of the aqua velva of the day, if you will. He shows up there. She can't keep her hands off him. She's touching him. She jumps on his back, and he takes off and goes to Crete. When he gets to Crete, he changes himself and says, I'm Zeus. And she can't resist him, and they have 3 kids together. One of them is Minos. Now, you'll see those pictures often. Whenever you see a white bull and you see a half-naked woman, it's generally the rape of Europa. That's what it's called, and it's the foundational story of the Minoans. First picture was a Rembrandt. This is Titian. This Goya has one. Everybody has one, but you'll see those a lot in the museum. The moon, Titan's moon, Jupiter's moon, Titan. Jupiter's moon, Europa, rather, is named after her because the Romans use planets, so Zeus is Jupiter. When Zeus is done with the bull, he throws it up into the sky, and that's where we get the constellation Taurus. Right. So now we're on the island. Zeus has to leave. He has 3 kids. He had just told his wife he was going for milk. You know, she's expecting him back. 3 kids later, he's back up there. So she's now on the island with her 3 kids. There's a king on the island, Ashtion. So he decides to marry her and adopt all 3 kids. Well, as he's getting sicker, it looks like he's going to pass. Minos wants to be the king, but he has a brother that's next in line. So he goes to the god Poseidon, and he said, look, I really want to be king. What do I have to do? Poseidon said, I can make you king, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a white bull come out of the water, a whole different white bull come out of the water. When it comes out of the water, it's going to be a beautiful bull. You have to sacrifice it to me. Minos says, I can do that. So he makes him the king. So you're the king. Bull comes out of the water. It's gorgeous. Minos says, I'm not taking this bull and killing it. This thing's beautiful. He puts it with his herd, takes a different bull. He goes, he'll never know. Different bull, sacrifices it. Well, he's Poseidon. He's a god. Of course he's going to know. So he's mad now. He said, oh, you think you can play games with me, huh? So he gives the bull this scent of the wife of Minos, and he tells the king, that bull's going to mate with your wife. And he also puts a spell on the wife. She wants to mate with the bull. So now King Midas has this real problem. He's got this bull chasing his wife around. So he... Now, look, I don't sit at home at night and think of these, this is the foundational story of the empire, What do you want me to do? It is a good story. So, King Minos has this great engineer, Daedalus. He's an engineer, he's a magician, jack of all trades, can solve any puzzle. He gives him the problem. He says, what are we going to do to protect my wife? Daedalus says, oh, I can figure something out. I'll make this wooden cow. It'll look just like the other cows. We'll hollow it out. We'll put your wife in there. They'll never know. Brilliant. Well, they figured it out. And as you can see, the bull ends up mating with his wife. So that didn't work out too good. A minotaur gets produced right here, half bull, half man, and it's man-eating. It's a flesh-eating manatee. So now the king's like, what am I going to do now? I have this creature running around, eating people on the island. If the island finds out, the people in my kingdom, that my wife had sex with the bull, you know, that's not going to be too good. I mean, I don't care how good your press secretary is. That's going to be a tough one, right? So he goes back to Daedalus. He said, what are we going to do? He said, no problem. I can make this labyrinth. And those of you going, anybody going to Knossos tomorrow? Palace? Yes, you see the ruins of that. So I can make this labyrinth. We'll put him in the middle. We'll lure him in the middle. Once he's in the middle, he can't get out. He said, great, let's do that. So he creates that with his with his son, Icarus. And they put in some ducks and some other animals in there, and they lower the Minotaur in. They get him in the middle there, and he's eating the animals and various things. They come out and they tell the king, we've built this, everything's good to go. Well, then the king says to himself, but you two know how to get in and out. And you two know the secret about my wife. So I need to put you two in there. So he has his guards walk them in. Of course, the guards get eaten. He stations some other guards outside. However, he's got the chief engineer in there. He's got the big brain in there. So the guy will take some wax and the feathers from all the dead ducks, the dead birds, and he makes wings, and they fly out of there. The problem is his son doesn't listen to his father, and he gets too close to the sun. The wax melts, the feathers fall off, falls into the ocean, and he dies. The father ends up flying off and lands in Sicily. Simultaneously, while this is going on for King Minos, his son, who's a great athlete, he goes to the Hellenistic Games in Athens, and he beats all the Athenians. King Aegeus, the king of Athens, is not happy with this. Who's this guy from Crete coming and doing this? So he said, I'm going to teach this kid a lesson. So just north of Athens, in the plain of Marathon, was this great bull, the bull of Marathon. He tells the kid, go out there. He said, I think you're the only one that can get this bull and kill him. If you do that, you're not only going to be famous, but I'll give you all this great fortune. So, of course, the kid eats that up. Yeah, I can go do that. The bull kills him. So now word gets back to King Minos. Your son's been killed because of the Athenian king. So he calls up his father Zeus and says, we have to punish the Athenians. So he punishes them with famine. Crops all fail. Now the Athenian king has to figure out how he's getting out of this. He goes up to Delphi, to the temple of Apollo, see the oracle, said, how can we stop this famine? He said, well, you're going to have to go see King Minos, and whatever he wants you to do, that's what you're going to have to do. So that's what he does. He goes to see the king, and the king says, every 9 years, you're going to send 7 girls and 7 boys to Crete, and I'm going to put them in my labyrinth, and that's the price you're going to have to pay. Well, as the ship's getting ready to take the first group of 7 and 7, King Aegeus' son, Theseus, decides, I'm going to go as one of the boys, and I'm going to go slay the Minotaur. His father tries to talk him out of it. He said, I'm going, because I want to try to save the people of Athens. So he goes, but his father says, here's what I'm going to ask of you. When you come back, when that ship comes back, if you're still alive, I want a white sail on the ship. If you're dead, I want a black sail on the ship so I don't meet the ship and find out in person like that. So they agree to those terms. He arrives on the island, Theseus. When he arrives on the island, he meets King Minos' daughter. She falls madly in love with him right off the bat. She doesn't want to see him die. She has this magic ball of string, so that when you roll it out, no matter where it goes, it'll roll all the way back out. So it's a way that if he makes his way in, he'll be able to make his way out. She said, I'll give you this magic ball of string only on the condition that if you make it back out, you take me off the island with you. So he agrees to the terms. He goes in, he slaughters the beast, makes his way out, takes her, they leave. They make a stop on the first island they see of Naxos, and he leaves her there. I'm done with you. Right? He just wanted a way out of the labyrinth. So this is the famous fresco from Pompeii at the Archaeological Museum in Naples, showing after Theseus, after he comes out of the labyrinth, and only one kid's still alive. So what happens is, she's obviously not happy, the daughter of Minos. She's on this island stranded. She's just been double-crossed by him. So she calls out to the gods. The god Dionysus hears her. He comes down, sees how beautiful she is. He falls in love with her, marries her, and then he says, I'm going to punish that guy for doing that to you. So as the ship is nearing Athens, King Aegeus is up on the cliff waiting for it. It's got the white sail because the sun's still alive, and just as it's getting there, Dionysus changes the sail to black and fools the king. The king sees it's a black sail, can't bear to be without his son, and heaves himself off the cliff into the ocean and kills himself. And that's how we get the Aegean Sea from King Aegeus from Athens. And that's the little payback there. So just to round things out back on Crete, we still have that crazy white bull running around the island. It's eating things, knocking things over. That'll be taken care of on Hercules' 7th labor. Now, I won't tell you what happens because I'll do the 7 labors. I think they're going to videotape it because it's like the day before you get off the ship. I gave this already last cruise. But, spoiler alert, Hercules does all 12 labors. So you can kind of figure out what happens, right? So that's another bull. So that's what happens to the bull on Crete. But the story isn't finished because we still have that engineer Daedalus. So what happens is King Minos, his son's killed, his daughter's on the island. He doesn't know the daughter double-crossed him. All he knows is the daughter's married to a god, so he's happy with that. He thinks Daedalus is the one that taught him how to get out of. So he's looking for Daedalus. So he comes out with this riddle. This is a triton shell. You have to take a piece of string from the top, wind it all the way through, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and you have to come out the other end of that. And he figures the only person that can solve that riddle and figure that out would be Daedalus. So he takes the shell and he goes from island to all the different kings. See who can figure it out. Nobody can figure it out except when he gets to Sicily. When he gets to Sicily, the king says, boy, I have somebody here that I think can solve this. I'll let him see if he can solve it. Brings it to him. Of course, he can solve it. He takes a very, very tiny ant. He ties a piece of string like a little piece of silk to it, and then the little ant works its way all the way and corkscrews around and comes out the other end. Knowing now that this must be Daedalus, King Minos says, I want to bring him back with me. Well, King of Sicily really likes this guy. He's a good engineer. He doesn't really want to give him up, but he doesn't want to have a fight. So he said, look, because you're a famous king, we'll have a banquet in your honor tonight. Why don't you take a bath because you have to cleanse yourself. We're going to have the ceremony in the temple for you with the banquet. King Minos says, yeah, I can do that. And then in the morning, you can take Daedalus with you. So as King Minos is taking a bath, he's in the great big basin. The king of Sicily and Daedalus boil a giant pot of water, and then they bring it and pour it on him and scold him to death. So he burns to death, and then from there he'll end up going down to Hades, and he's one of the 3 judges in Hades. And so that's the story of King Minos, who the Minoans are named after. I know it's kind of a long story, but it's the foundational story of the Minoans. And you'll see a lot of their stuff around related to that at the different museums. This ring on the right I just put here because it's kind of funny. It'll be in the museum tomorrow, those of you going to the museum. The one in the museum supposedly is the real one, but who knows. In the 1800s, this farmer said he found the king's ring, and he sold it to Evans, who was doing most of the excavations. Said he found a couple of them, sold 2 of them to Evans. Evans was kind of a big deal finding these rings. Turns out they were both fakes. So you have to wonder what else he got wrong. So this one could be a fake too, I don't know, but it's in the museum as the real one. So I had to point that out to you. So let's talk about the Minoans, right? This is the big palace most of you are going to go to tomorrow. It's considered the first great city in Europe. It's an advanced city. The Minoans are an advanced people. They have hot and cold water, running water inside. They have sewerage going out, great artwork. They make great vases. They're great trading people. It's a very top-down society. I'm only going to put a couple of slides of what it looks like because I want you to go there tomorrow and see this stuff. But the pillars, for example, they're very small on the bottom and then they taper and get wider to the top. So it's not a traditional Greek pillar or Roman pillar even. You'll see that's the oldest throne in Europe right there. It's guarded by the two griffins. The griffins have a lion body and an eagle head because the lion is the king of the beast on land and the eagle is the king so that in the air, so it's a double king. You'll generally see that with around kings. It guards religious ceremonies. Any treasure hunters out there, they're always looking for the griffin because it's supposed to be always guarding treasure. So you see that. So that's kind of what it would have looked like. In its heyday, it held maybe as many, the palace, 100,000 people. As I said, it was top down, so they had these huge warehouses where they would store grain and wine, and so they would gather everything up and then distribute it out to society. That's the type of society it was. They have religious temples in there, housing in there, just a massive complex. Now, it kept being destroyed by earthquake, rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt, because Crete has a lot of activity on the island, so there were a lot of earthquakes. Plus, where this is built, there were people living there and building there since 7000 BC. So basically, from that palace, you have 5,000 years underneath it. It's kind of like Rome. You know, you stick a shovel in Rome and dig, and you hit something, and then if you dug under that, you hit something else, and they just keep building on top of each other. So that present location there has been there for quite a while. You'll see in their pottery. So when you see we see the bowl. We know that's Minoan. We see the double axe, which is called a labyrinth. See that in all the pottery. The Mycenaeans will pick this up as well. But generally, when you see that, you could date it right away. You know, you can say, okay, that's Minoan. Or if it's not Minoan, it's Mycenaean, but they're just picking it up as Minoan. So, and the other thing about the double axe, it was a sacred symbol. If you put that on something, you could not destroy it. So, put that on a house, a building, put that on a piece of pottery, and the only people that were allowed to actually carry that were female goddesses, could carry the double axe, and that was it. So you'll see quite a bit of that around. Their language was Linear A. You'll see the tablet at the museum tomorrow, those of you going there. Thing about Linear A is they haven't been able to decipher it. And if you think about it, I mean, we sent the man to the moon. We have spacecraft going past, I guess they call it the dwarf planet Pluto now. I don't know if dwarf's still the correct word or not, but that last I heard, that's what they call it, the dwarf planet Pluto. They downgraded it. What a bummer that is, huh? They had 9 planets when I was a kid. We're down to what, 8.5? You know, we're losing planets. Anyway, they haven't been able to decipher this yet. But whenever they find Linear A, they know the Minoans have been there because that's their language. Also in the museum tomorrow is this disc, this face-top disc. Now here's the interesting thing about this. 241 characters, it's double-sided, 45 unique characters, and it's the only one they've found, and they can't decipher this either. So they don't know what it is. Okay? They date it to about 1700 BC, but here's the thing, just because it's dated from 1700 BC and they find it on Crete, doesn't mean it came to Crete, right? I could buy a 2,000-year-old pocket full of Roman coins, go to Iowa, throw them on the ground, somebody can find them in 10 years. That doesn't mean the Romans were there 2,000 years ago. Right? So it very well could have been brought on the island, dropped on the island, could have washed ashore on the island. So they don't know for sure that that's actually Minoan, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. They find it on Crete, dated to 1700 BC, and they think, well, it must be from the Minoan civilization. But since they can't decipher it, they don't know. And the other thing is, they haven't found anything else, so there's a thing that it might be a fake. You only find one of something, makes you wonder. So, but that's in the museum tomorrow. It's an interesting piece. Any big brains out there that want to decipher it, you could probably get the movie deal, book deal, talk shows, the whole thing. Right. I'll show you the trading pattern real quick. So Thera, just as a spoiler alert, and our next slide's going to blow up. That's modern day Santorini. It's only, 90, 100 miles this way. Rhodes is about 125 miles. But you can see most of the trading is north of Crete. That's the point I want to make here with the trading map. So as you can see, what's going to happen when Thera blows, right? Boom. Get the big boom, 1600 BC, roundish. They don't know the exact date. Doesn't matter if 1599, 1598, who cares? Doesn't matter for our purposes. But when it blows, the ash is going to go all the way to Crete. It's going to Rhodes, but that isn't the big, that's great for saving all the colored frescoes. But what wipes out a lot of the people, of course, are the tidal waves. And it wasn't a tidal wave, it was tidal waves. So as one would come, wiped out the whole northern fleet. See, they were a trading people. They didn't really have a great army. They were traders, so they had the ships. The whole northern ship line from the previous up here all wiped out. And then as the people go to try to rebuild it, another tidal wave, boom, wipes them out a second time. Right? They just keep getting pounded. So it wasn't an event that wiped out the entire civilization, but it really, really, really weakened them because they were a trading people. The only reason they hadn't been conquered and they didn't need an army was their navy was so great from trading that nobody could get to the island past the navy. Once the navy's gone, now it's an open season on their island. So they're going to last for a little bit longer. This is how we know, or one of the reasons we know it wasn't an event that wiped out the entire island and that was it, and that's the harvester vase, because they can date that to about 1500 BC. That's found on the island. That'll be in the museum tomorrow. It's actually not a vase, it's a rhyton. On the right here is the rhyton from Egypt. It's an ostrich shell. They put holes in the top and bottom to take the ostrich out of it, seal the bottom back up, and then they put the cap on the top, and they use it for religious ceremonies. So this was in Crete, that was their takeoff, the Minoan takeoff on it. They emulate it. That particular one has a scene of, I think, 27 different characters on it. So this shows they were still trading with people that had some wealth. This isn't just a utilitarian item here. And this is at 1500, so they know that things were still going on the island trade-wise. But, the Mycenaeans come in, and like I said, they had been so weakened that they were able to overtake the island. They'll adopt a lot of the same stuff from the Minoans, some of the pottery, some of that, but they'll just try to pick up their trade routes. And they're just from mainland Greece, basically. So they're going to be there from 1450 to about 1100 BC. The Mycenaeans use Linear B as opposed to Linear A. Linear B is basically a better version of the Phoenician alphabet. So the Phoenicians really had the first, but it gets modified to Linear B, and Linear B will be the first alphabet considered of Western civilization. This is the Greek alphabet, and this has been deciphered. Mycenaeans are going to collapse about 1100 BC. It's not a light switch event. It's going to be a series of things. As I said, Crete has a lot of activity for earthquakes, so there was some smaller volcanoes. There were a lot of earthquakes, so they're having that problem. On top of that, they had a lot of migration coming into the island. And the pie's only so big, and at the end of the day, the people at the top, the elite, their slice never gets smaller. So that means all the other people's slices kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. At some point you reach critical mass, people aren't happy, And so the civilization just collapsed from that. Who grows the crops? It's not the people at the top, the people on the bottom. So if the people on the bottom aren't growing the crops, aren't happy growing the crops, so the civilization will collapse. And then Crete's kind of it's a bit of a nothing burger for a while. You know, it's not really, the archaic age is going to kick in. All that really means archaic, just old-fashioned. So it's going to go into these city-states. So the easiest way to think of a city-state, if we take the state of California, for example, Sacramento will be its own city-state, its own state. San Francisco, San Diego, L.A. So they're their own autonomous areas instead of just the part of California in general. They just break away and they just want to run their own show. It was easy to do in Greece because of geography. You had the mountains, you had water. They were able to have these city-states where they were far enough away from people that they could sustain themselves. But the problem is they do a lot of infighting. So they continue doing all of this infighting. And I just put that up for the coins. But they'll end up, that collapses at around 330 BC from all this infighting. Because they, you know, if you're a whole, that's one thing. But if you have 12 different parts and then this part wants that and this part wants that, so the city-states aren't getting along. I put that up because you'll see the dolphin on the coin and the trident. Tomorrow you might see the double dolphin. That's the symbol today, but it's a derivative from the single dolphin that they had. So that's going to bring us to the Romans. Right? So what happens is Mithridates VI from Pontus, he's up in the Black Sea area. And he sees what's happening with the city-states fighting each other and getting weaker, and he decides, well, I might want to come down here. Well, the Romans are down there as well. This is Roman Republic. This isn't Roman Empire yet. Right? But the Romans are still there. Well, the Romans think that Crete is siding with Mithridates VI. So they end up declaring war. So they have a beef with Crete plus Pontus. Mithridates actually had 22 city-states, and he's called a polyglots. He spoke all 22 languages. I never even heard that word before until I learned about him. Anybody ever heard of that before, polyglots? A few of you? Yeah. See, that's where the big brains are sitting, huh? Right there. So anyway, here's what happens. The Romans end up crushing them. Right? That's going to be a story for many hundreds of years, right? So, but I want to point this out on the Roman name. So the Romans are going to be in the area, going to be in Crete now. But you see that name, the four? I'm going to talk a minute about the Roman name, the trinomia. Because if you know the trinomia, you can see a lot of different names at museums and have an understanding of what's going on. And it's just a simple little, not a trick, but it's just a simple little thing if you learn it. Even if there's four, it's still part of what's called the trinomia. You see this at the end, Creticus? That's just a nickname. See, in the United States, we put the nickname in the middle. Al Scarface Capone. Right? Babe, George, the Babe, Herman Ruth. Right? We stick it in the middle like that. John, Dapper Don Gotti. The Romans put it at the end. So the trinomia is the first name, Quintus. That's called the prenomen. The second name would be his last name. That's called the nomen. Now, in this particular case, you'll see he has a third. And you're like, why does he have a third? Well, if you married into a famous family, you would take their name as well. So you basically have two last names, if you will. So if we use this example on myself, Quintus, Peter, that's my prenomen. That would be my LaSorsa, that's my last name. And then that would be my, let's say, my mother's maiden name, if my mother was a famous family. So I'd be Peter LaSorsa Tridello is my mom's maiden name. Peter LaSorsa Tridello, and then my nickname. When I was in Special Forces, my nickname was The Source. So my nickname, that would be The Source. This particular one, this is called a nickname of virtue, because he gets Creticus because he defeated Crete. So that's how he gets that nickname. You'll see Germanicus for Germany, right? So whenever you see a nickname for a body of land, That means the person was victorious over that land. That's the highest name you can get. That's called, if it's on the third, it's called a cognomen. If it's on the fourth like this, it's called an agdamen. So, simple example. This is going to be Marcus, the prenomen, Valerius, his last name, the nomen, and then that's going to be the cognomen. Corvus just means raven. In this particular instance, he was in battle in Gaul, fighting a giant. A raven landed on his helmet, and then it flew toward the giant. He was able to slay him, and so he picks up the cognomen of Corvus. So this is kind of an in-between. Sometimes the nickname is like this. Sometimes it's based on he has red hair, big nose, one eye. It's a facial feature. And sometimes it's going to be based on if he's victorious in battle. Probably the most famous general the Romans ever had. Right? So Publius, his first name, Peter, Cornelius, LaSorsa, Scipio, Tridello, and then he picks up the agdamen Africanus. He was the great general in the Second Punic War that beat the Carthaginian general Hannibal the Great in the province of Africanus. So he picks up this great agdamen. So when you're at the museums and you see these long names, they actually mean something. You can tell what families they belong to. First name really doesn't matter, but you can see the families they belong to, and then you can see if they have a nickname and what the nickname related to. All right? So the Western Roman period. It's going to start out, as I say, in the Roman Republic in 29 BC on when Octavian picks up he's called Augustus, which is the nickname, just means the venerated. Right? So that would be his cognomen. So these ruins here are going to be Suda Bay. Okay, Roman period. Suda Bay. So the reason I'm stopping it at 3:30 here, and I'll tell you when we get into another slide. Suda Bay, Suda Bay. Right, so you can see some of the Roman ruins there. St. Paul will stop there in the 1st century and preach. He actually is in prison in Rome, gets released from prison, stops here, preaches a little bit, but mainly he will train St. Titus. And so St. Titus will have the church here. That museum is going to be in Suda Bay, but they actually moved it in 2020, and then because of the pandemic, they didn't get it moved, so I don't believe they've moved it yet. I've checked online, and they haven't shown it as open yet. So I just want to point that out to you in case you were going to go to the museum there. That's Suda Bay. So what happens next is this is going to fall to the Byzantine Empire, but it's still part of the Roman Empire. So this slide is just showing the Latin and Greek influence, right? So the western part of the empire is going to be Latin, and the blue part, purple part is going to be Greek. That's called the Byzantine Empire. So the Romans had a funny way of doing it. If you couldn't speak Latin or Greek, you were considered a barbarian. Didn't matter where you were from. It wasn't racial or ethnic. It was based on those two things. You either spoke Latin or Greek or you're a barbarian. So what's going to happen in 330, setting up to 330, in 286, Diocletian's going to split the empire into east and west. 293, he further breaks it up into the Tetrarchy. Those of you that have been to Venice, they have the Tetrarchy at St. Mark's there on the pillar. The rule by four is all that is. So he has the Augustus and the Caesar. He sub-breaks it up. Constantine the Great is going to end up unifying the empire. In 324, he's going to move the capital from Rome to Byzantium, rename it Constantinople, but it's still known as the Byzantine Empire for that reason. That's how it gets Byzantine Empire, or Eastern Roman Empire is the same thing as the Byzantine Empire, if that's easy for you to understand. So he'll make that the capital. It'll get split up again in 395 under Theodosius I, and never to be reunited again. The west will fall in 476, and the east will continue until 1453. So Everything you see here, even though this is just showing Greek influence, it's pretty well the way the map was for the Byzantine Empire after the West fell. So you can see it's going to continue on as the Roman Empire, but just as the Byzantine Empire, as the eastern portion from 330 to 824. So another 500 years it's going to be under Roman rule. The Muslims will take it in 824. Right away, Byzantium, the Eastern Empire, comes back and takes it again. Chandex is just the old city. Today it's Herculaneum, so it's just going to be where we're going to be docking, and you're going to go to that museum there. There'll be a 2-year siege, but they're able to take it back, and they'll hold it until 1204. And what happens in 1204 is Pope Innocent III decides on the Fourth Crusade. He wants to go take Jerusalem. He has a great army, 0 navy. So he has to go to the Venetians, hat in hand, says, I need your navy. They say, fine. We have a beef with 2 different cities, Zadar in Croatia and Constantinople. And we're going to take them both back, then we'll go to Jerusalem. He said, okay. They go to Zadar, wipe the place out, slaughter everybody, and they're all Christians, so the Pope's livid. Can't do much about it because he still needs the boats. They go on to Constantinople, sack that place. Of course, they have the boats, so the Venetians are able to take all the loot back with them to Venice. That's why Venice has all the good loot. They had the boats. Well, yeah, all the good loot's in Venice. But Constantinople, when it falls, now the Venetians have Crete. They have the area. So the green is just showing you where the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantines, those are their defensive walls. The Venetians are going to expand the walls, and they'll hold it until 1669. This one slide on 1212, what happens in 1204, the Venetians take it. From 1204 to 1212, the Genoese, who also had a great navy, they take it for 6 months. The Venetians kick them out. They do a little back and forth. 1212, the Genovese are finally kicked out for good, but for all practical purposes, the Venetians were here from 1204 to 1669. The Genovese really never had a presence, even if they took it over for a few days or a few weeks. For all practical purposes, no presence. In 1363, St. Titus, who remember was trained under Paul, there's a big tax revolt. The Venetians were very heavy on taxes, and so there was a 5-year struggle over that. So you might see some of that tomorrow, some mention of that, so I threw that slide in there for you. And then this is going to be in Suda Bay, this church. I put the church slide up for a reason. There's about 300 churches from the Byzantine period on Crete. And depending on which account you read, up to 5,000 churches from the Venetian period. And I think a lot of it depends on what they counted as a church. If a church burns down and they rebuild it, is that 2 churches? Is it the church in a monastery? Are those 2 separate things? But even if their counting's a little loose, there's a lot of churches on the island of Crete. If you like churches, this is your place. So I put that in there for you. El Greco was born in Crete, moves to Spain, and then to Italy and then Spain. 2 of his paintings in photo just outside of Herculaneum tomorrow. So those of you that want to go to that museum there, you can see a couple of his paintings. Ottoman Empire will take Crete in 1669. Remember, the Ottomans are who defeat the Romans in Constantinople. So Constantinople falls in 1453. Remember, the Venetians take it in 1204, but then they pull out. So from 1204 to 1453, the Byzantine Empire is still there, although it's just shattered. It's a shell of itself. But the Ottomans will take that, and then they keep on going. So they take Crete in 1669. They build this big fortress, this will be Suda Bay for you, for those of you who want to see the fortress. This will be a political prison in the 20th century. The Greek War of Independence will kick off in 1821. They're trying to push out the Ottomans. Probably the best story in that. This is going to be Suda Bay as well. This church, what's going to happen, there's 964 people in the church. They're armed. They're all trying to repel the Ottomans. They're low on ammunition. They have a lot of gunpowder. Rather than surrender, they end up blowing themselves up in the church. They all end up dying, but 114 who get taken prisoner, and 3 or 4 had run out to try to get reinforcements, so they survive as well. So that's kind of the big story on that monastery there. And then finally in 1898, the Greeks get independence, but Crete will remain an independent state for a 10-year period. And then in 1908, it officially gets reunited with the mainland, but it doesn't officially get reunited on paper until 1923 after World War II with the Treaty of Lausanne. So, and that's the treaty that makes Yugoslavia whole, and etc. And that just briefly, I'm out of time. In World War II, I just wanted to put this slide in. The Germans decide to take the island by paratrooper only. So they send in their elite paratroopers. The people on the island, the Cretans on the island, along with a few Allied forces, mount a guerrilla war, and they're so successful, even though they got overrun, but they inflict so many casualties on the German elite paratroopers that Hitler will never again start an invasion with his paratroopers because of the losses inflicted. So they had a good showing. So that's my version of Crete. I hope you have a great day. We got the captain coming at 7. I'll be doing roads tomorrow, and thank you for coming.